What's up, guys? Peter von Panda here. Hey, standing in front of this 2015 Hyundai Sonata, and it's a car I've been using here for a while, and I've got some pretty heavy drive time on it, and I thought I'd share what I love and hate about this car. Now, this is not going to be a overview of the car. You can go to a lot of other reviews for that. This is really going to be a bitch session about all the little things in excruciating detail that I hate or love, you know, things that have surprised me to the upside or to the downside on this car. First of all, this is a 2015 Hyundai Sonata. It's about a year old. I've got about 18,000 miles on it, and I have been driving it daily here for a while because the weather hasn't been great, and this car was only about $23,000. So in the low 20s you can get pretty much this exact same car. Now, what I do love about it is actually it's really nicely styled, and for a car that is kind of a competitor to a Honda Accord and other cars, it has you know, this sloping sweeping coupe style. I hate to use the word coupe with a four-door car, but overall I think it looks low and sleek, and it's about the same as a lot of other cars in total overall dimensions, but it just kind of has a little bit more of a rakish look, you know, kind of similar to some other cars that I like the Chrysler 200 and the Mercedes CLA and things like that, but obviously in a much lower price point. Now, the devil's in the details here too, and so while they do a pretty good job in proportions overall, this is kind of the Hyundai and Kia design language and style right now. They're kind of making everything in this coupe like sleek look, and the Azera I think which is the higher level than this, actually kind of hits that out of the park. And then the Kia Optima, which I think is basically the sister car to this, I actually think looks a little better, but I think overall they've done a nice job. Now, one of the things that I want to show you here is that to increase kind of perceived value on cars, what they do a lot is put trim, like metal trim, around the windows. That's not new, it's not a secret by any means, but it does increase perceived value, and they have done that here. And it's not like a chrome like trim, it's just a little bit more matted than that, but it looks nice. It's not as matted as like a brushed stainless steel, but that looks good. Now, the different thing that they've done is they've taken that trim and run it all the way to the headlight, and in the headlight there is kind of a matching piece of trim that kind of flows down, and so what it does is it kind of creates this body line all the way down. And what you typically don't have is kind of an accent trim up splitting the fender from the hood. Now, I actually think that looks great, and it's one of those things that is pretty unique, and they've done it pretty tastefully here. And I bring that up because not only is it fairly unique and it was a good idea, and it kind of ties it together with this headlamp, it almost makes it look like one piece, but they've done a much better job than Buick, in my opinion, who I blasted in one of my earlier videos, that they just stick chrome on, a really thick chrome, wide chrome, and it looks kind of ostentatious and gaudy, and it doesn't really look intentional. And any company that puts a fake grill or vent on a car is on my shit list, because I hate that. I think that is absolutely stupid. On Buicks, those fake hood vents are no better than that crap that you buy at like Pet Boys and stick on. So I think that is stupid. Now, let me bust out the key here. This is not a keyless car. This is just it has a remote here, which is not unlike a lot of other remotes that you'll see for cars, but actually it feels and looks a lot better, I think, than other remotes for other cars, you know, particularly my GM and even the Jeep Grand Cherokee that I showed you. I think this is a nicer remote overall, and one of the reasons is it seems to have the kind of this metal loop here that kind of extends almost halfway around the key fob itself, and then on the other side it has the key itself here, and so you have kind of this metal surround all the way around, and it makes it feel nice. It's also got pretty nice weight, and the plastic here is textured and kind of feels a little bit like leather, so it's pretty nice. Now, the key flips out just like you'd expect, and the buttons are right there. Now, what I don't like about this is that on most remotes here, the whole button depresses, or it's usually a hard plastic, and so if I hit it anywhere, it pushes it down. These are rubberized. I think you might be able to tell that, but the button itself is right in the center, and the outsides don't move. Now, it might be a little hard to show you on camera here, but as I run my finger across, I can feel that the button itself, the little button underneath the rubber, is right behind the icon there. So if I hit it, the car will unlock like it did. But if I hit it on either side, there's nothing. It doesn't depress. And so what I don't like is that you actually have to kind of hunt for this little tiny channel in the middle of it and get your finger really into it in order to use the buttons. So that's kind of annoying. I don't like the way the buttons work. Again, I told you it's going to be detailed. I know a lot of people are wondering about is because of this coupe-like design and the really sloping back, you know, does that kill headroom in the back? Is it hard to get in and out of the car? And, you know, I know the Chrysler 200 actually got canned because people didn't like getting in the back seat of it. And that car was actually designed very heavily off this. Yes, you do have a pretty sloping roof line here, but what I actually like about it is I can get in here. And I do have to duck my head a little bit, but it's not bad. It's a lot worse in the Mercedes CLA and the Chrysler 200 for some reason. And I think what the difference is that this car is longer. And that does a couple things. It makes it a little easier to get in and out. It gives me a little more headroom. I don't feel as claustrophobic back here as I do actually in the front seat because of the headroom space. And because I think it's a little longer, look at all of this leg room. I mean, it's kind of crazy to me because that seat is where I am driving it at, being 5'7", and that is a crazy amount of leg room. This seat is just a little bit further back than that one and is in a fairly comfortable position for someone of my size too to be driving the passenger seat, although my guess is that they would bring it back a couple more inches. But even still, this is massive amounts of leg room for kind of a mid-size sedan. Now I'm getting snow on the carpet here, but even if you were to rob me of a couple more inches, this is a better experience sitting back here than the Chrysler 200 or the Mercedes CLA. Now, again, different types of cars you could argue, but in fact, I think this was a big surprise to me. So really comfortable car for 4 adults, which was a shock. I'm gonna sit down and show you the very first thing that I like. And it's a technology called blind spot warning. Except in this car, instead of a computer and a lot of electronics, they do put in one of these little curved pieces of glass there. And so it shows you a car in your blind spot. I actually like that as opposed to little flashing lights, warnings and audible warnings there. You know, this is an old school method of showing you your blind spot. I like that they've integrated it there. It's just up in here in the corner. You can buy little round stick-ons or little curved stick-ons that go on side mirrors here. I have one of my Fiat 500. Some automakers actually curve the whole end of the mirror there, but it's a great way to give you a little more protection without having to put a lot of extra hardware in the car. And this car is like a base model, and the seats on it are cloth. Now, I actually don't like this cloth material, and you might say, that's not bad. You know, they do use 2 types of material or 2 types of patterns. Kind of, it looks like a mesh here, but it's there's nothing breathable about it. It is just woven to have a pattern, and then this kind of gray cloth material. Now, this is probably going to depend a little bit on the color combo you buy, but the material itself just isn't that nice to me. It feels like a cheap couch material. In fact, the material that they use in my Fiat 500, I feel like is higher quality. It just feels that way to me. The material that I had, the cloth material that I had in my Jeep Liberty, feels like a higher quality. This is obviously 5, 6, 7 years newer than both those cars, and I don't feel like the material is actually better. I feel like it's a little worse, and it's hard to tell you exactly why. It's just one of those perception things, but I think it's because, you know, it has such kind of this wide quilted pattern, a fairly tight weave on everything, but it just looks cheap, it feels cheap, and it's unfortunate because a lot of the rest of the cars I'll show you actually feels and looks pretty nice. Let me show you the other thing that I don't like, and let me kind of preface it by saying the steering column on this car is pretty narrow, okay? And this car does not have keyless, despite what I said before, but the steering column is narrow, and so what that does is it takes the ignition cylinder here and makes it really deep on the car. It might be a little hard to see here, but if I put this key in the ignition cylinder, and it's hard to kind of hunt for because it's to get my hand around the key in order to turn it. If I grab it like this, you know, my hand is kind of in an awkward position like this because my arm is hitting the steering wheel and I've got to really kind of stretch my hand awkwardly to get it on the key. If I lean over here, I can get a little bit better angle, but I'm still hitting the steering wheel. And that's just because of how narrow the steering column is. Now, on a lot of other cars, including my 500, the steering column I think is one wider, but then also they kind of put a hump where the ignition is. And so not only do you get the benefit of a larger and a wider steering column, but then they usually add like another inch where the ignition is. And so you're really kind of more putting your key about here, you know. So and also what that allows you to do is they usually angle it out so the key is going out. Now, what I have to do here is put the key in like this. And what I want to show you is that what I really hate, this might be a little hard to see, but I grab the key like this, and I think a lot of people would, and kind of my natural hand position would be like this. You can see there that that key is almost perpendicular to the actual angle that it needs to go into the ignition on. So what you end up having to do is turn the key kind of uncomfortably towards you in order to get it in. So right now, not only is my hand cockeyed like this, but it really is bent up like this so I can get my hand on the key. Now, I've got the camera really low here, so I have it kind of uncomfortably turned towards me like this. And then in order to turn the key, you actually don't even rotate it far enough to where your hand would be comfortable like this. It's actually short of that. And so the whole time you're starting the car, your hand is in an uncomfortable position. So let me gonna just show you here if I can. Put the camera low here, and then I'll start the car. And now, in the final position is maybe where my hand I would actually want it. So even when I'm starting it, it's still a little short. Right here it's not bad here, but your hand, because it starts down here, it's really, really frustrating. Okay, so I hate the position of it. They could have solved that by doing the tumbler another 90 degrees or 45 or anything. But even now, this key, when you want to turn it off, you have to pull it. You have to kind of get your hand really far rotated, you know, and it's just technique, but it is what it is. Now, I want to show you something else here. So I've got the steering wheel lined up. I want to turn it. I'm going to turn it just a little off center. So center's right here. I'm going to turn it this way, and I pulled into a parking spot and an angle. And what I want to do is fire up the car because I want to show you the next thing that kind of annoys me. Over not even just about 45 degrees. Let's go ahead and start the car up again here. And does a little system check icon. I have no problems with that. But now what it tells me to do is align the steering wheel. I can tell you that the wheels are not massively out of alignment. If I just put the car back now into drive and start pulling away, I'm only slightly off center. Yes, I am off center, but not by much. And so my issue is here, if you have the steering wheel 30 or 45 degrees over, and you know, that can happen a lot, and happens to me all the time, whether I'm pulling into a parking spot or pulling into my garage, you're kind of cutting the wheel over a little bit. You do not have to have your wheels way out of alignment for that message to come off, and it's just another nuisance. I have never backed into another car or scraped another car because my wheels weren't perfectly aligned as I was coming out. I think we all let off the brake very slowly, so it just seems like over-engineering. It's like something they could do, and so they did it, and I don't see any value in it. It's just a nuisance, and it's like another chime and an animation that comes up there that is that's really annoying. So I hate that, man. I hate it. You do get a plastic steering wheel. There's no leather covering on that. It seems like it's one of those small things that you know, companies could do. Just leather wrap every steering wheel. They do a pretty good job of texturing it to match the rest of it, but it doesn't have the nice feel of leather, and it doesn't obviously look at all like it. They don't even do any fake stitching, which I'm actually okay with, but otherwise this steering wheel feels pretty nice. Now, the other thing that I don't like is, and it's kind of the nature of this coupe-like shape, is that the windshield is really raked. Now, It's going to be a little hard to tell you, but I've got the phone basically on my forehead, and the roof is right here. The ceiling is right here. In fact, this visor, when it comes down, it doesn't hit me in the face, but you feel like it's going to. Now, I'll try to get you a little video here of me actually sitting here. This is where I would sit. This is the position that I've had this seat in, and the headroom isn't a problem. I'm 5'7", and I haven't felt like, oh, I'm not gonna, even if I extend up, I'm not hitting the roof now or the ceiling. But I cannot put my hand, I cannot get a fist up here without pressing it between, touching the ceiling and my head. And in fact, as I get down here to my forehead, it gets even worse. I am not that far off. Now, yeah, I don't have to worry about kind of leaning forward and hitting it and things like that, but it's like one of these things that kind of creates this little claustrophobia effect that you just feel like everything is really close. And again, it's the nature of this type of car, but one of the effects here is that the sight line is very low here too. You kind of you're always looking down, and if you want to look up, especially if you're really close to a stoplight, you've got to lean forward here to see up, and you do have to kind of duck down because then I will hit my head on stuff. So for the sake of style, you might suffer a little bit. If you're a tall guy, you might really hate this. You can lower the seat a little bit and that'll help, but it is what it is. Now, while we're up here, let me show you. I actually like the headliner material that they use. Thank goodness that gone are the days of that like fuzzy felt like headliner. That trapped dirt, the look was fuzzy and didn't look good. Because it's kind of smooth, the smooth like mesh material, it's not bad. In fact, like I said, I've said in other things, it kind of reminds me a little bit of like football or sports jersey material. Now, what is interesting is that this headliner material I actually kind of like better than the seat material. They're similar, but there might be actually a little more shine to the headliner material, and so it kind of gives the headliner a little bit more quality, synthetic fiber look than the seats, which kind of are a little bit fuzzy and a little bit dull, and don't really add anything to the car. All right. Overall, I actually really like this interior. I like the fact that they have this flat panel here. Kind of reminds me of Saab's kind of generation ago. This kind of broad flat panel up here kind of reminds me of the previous generation Audis. Now they've gone to a little more rounded, but I like that they're not doing that stupid cockpit, everything slopes towards you kind of look that GM seems to be banking on, that is so 15 years ago, to try to make everything look like it's a futuristic swooping cockpit. I mean, I think if you look at Audis, BMWs, they've all kind of gone to this modular stacked look here where things are very accessible, but it doesn't have to feel like you're in a kind of a futuristic pod. I really feel like GM is way behind the times on this. This is a pretty nice look, and in fact, even though you have flat plastics and that tends to look really cheap, I think they've done a nice job. This is soft-ish material. Kind of, to me, it looks like a little like elephant hide because it has like a matte finish, but it's like the first generation BMW X5 type of material, dash material, and so that's nice. And even the plastic around here, which can tend to look a little Fisher-Price-ish, is nice and matte, and it has some texture to it and doesn't look super cheap. Now they've also hidden that and kind of disguised it by putting in some metal trim, or that's actually probably plastic, but some of the silver plastic ish metalish trim around here kind of helps break up the plastic and makes it look a little high quality. So I think they've actually done a really nice job on there. Where they probably didn't do a great job to me is these door pulls, which are kind of cheapish plastic, and there's nothing that tries to make them look like they're leather wrap, no fake stitching, which I'm okay with, but it's just right here where you're grabbing these door pulls, they look a little bit like kind of low-end Honda Civics of yore. All right. The last thing I will throw out here is that this version obviously has like a silver trim all the way around, and I really, really like it. I hate wood. I am so over wood. I just don't think it looks good. I don't understand why we still associate wood with luxury. In fact, I'd much rather have silver or you know, brushed aluminum or brushed steel or something like that look in a car. It makes it look sporty to me. And this doesn't try to look like metal. It's clearly plastic. And in fact, what you can see here is when they pressed in this kind of dimple design, you can see where the pieces that get molded in are just flat, you know, so it's obviously one piece. They don't even try to make it look like it's metal on top. But what they've done here is actually picked a pretty nice paint color or plastic color if the plastic is color is molded all the way through, and then they've dimpled it with like this little you know, kind of like checkerboard pattern, like square pattern, and they're little diamonds, and they feel good. You know, they break up the light, and so it kind of gives you a nice matte finish, and I think it looks really, really good. I mean, in fact, it looks, you know, better than kind of the previous generation of Lincolns that did a big flat silver panel. So I actually like it a lot, and I think this, even if I were spending money to get the highest trim Sonata, I would like this as opposed to the wood that inserts that they have and that they actually do make available on the highest end. All right, let's go down here to the center here. One of the things that I like, and it's a little weird, is I like this shifter. It's not that big. I don't have a huge hand, and it's easy to grab, and it's comfortable. And I find it funny that most car companies can't get shifters right. I think it looks pretty good. They have kind of this piano black finish on top, and then it's plastic around here. There's a little bit of silver trim on it. So it looks good, but it feels good. It's very much like a pistol grip, and it fits the hand nicely. You can get a nice good grip on it, whether you're going over the top or grabbing it around or however you like gripping. And it looks pretty good too. It actually looks to me like the shifters that came in Volvos. All right, it does have a trigger button on the front here, so that in order to get it in gear, you do have to pull that. But I even like that. It's got a nice resistance. It's not super sloppy, and you do need to kind of put a little more pressure on it than you do on some of the other cars that have these trigger buttons. But the cool thing about that is, because you have to put a little bit of pressure on it, it feels high quality. There's nothing rattling, shaking and echoey about it. And in fact, it feels like to me that the plastic is thick all the way through. It does not feel like a hollow shifter. The Jeep Grand Cherokee that I showed you in a previous video, I think the shifter looks beautiful. It's stupid. It doesn't work right because it's a return to center shifter. But as soon as you put your hand on it, you can tell that it's a hollow piece of plastic. It looks good until you touch it. This thing looks okay, and then when you touch it, it feels nice and solid. So I actually like that shifter. Hate to just love on a shifter, but I am. Now, I also want to jump up here. We have a, you know, it's probably like a 5.5 or 6, between a 5 and a 6 inch LCD display. I actually like this. I think that they've done a nice job. I don't know that you can get a bigger one, but what I really like is that even though it's a fairly small display, it doesn't look like it's a small display where a larger display could go. And I actually don't know if you can get a bigger one, but the buttons are all in the right spot. You know, the Mercedes CLA has a tendency, there's 2 versions of screens that you can get it, and the BMW i3 is similar. And what they do is they keep the footprint the same, but they shrink the screen down and put this huge bezel around it, and that's stupid to me. But this isn't very big, but it doesn't have to be, and it doesn't look like you've stepped down to you know, a lower end option or anything. So I like that it's a small display, but it looks appropriate. Now, if I do go and shift into reverse here, what you can see is that this does have a backup camera, and so that's cool. I can actually reverse here a little bit, and it does have trajectory lines, which I'm actually pretty surprised about in a car at this price point. A lot of them will have the backup reverse screen, and I think by law that's kind of going to be on every car, but to have trajectory lines here that move when you turn the steering wheel is a pretty nice little option to have in a car at this price point. What I don't like is that it doesn't have the reverse sensors, so you don't get a beep 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 as you're getting closer to things. That's a big miss. I understand that they're extra hardware, but to me it can't be more than a couple $100 of hardware. It's missing on my GMC. The camera's okay, but without the, I'd rather have the audible tones than the camera, to be honest, because for me, I could turn and look, as we all have had to do in the past, and I could do without the camera. And a lot of times I'm looking at the camera anyway, just to verify, because sometimes I don't trust what I can't see on the outsides. But it would be nice to have that audible warning, and so I feel like that should be the priority over the rear view camera. I hate the sound of this rig. It sounds terrible. I have played around with the sound settings here. I have adjusted the bass and the middle and the treble, and it works, but it never sounds great, especially when you're just cruising and maybe you have people in, so you have a little bit of background music, kind of at that lowest volume. It sounds really tinny, and it sounds like you only have the speakers up on the dash, which you do, but you also have speakers in the door, so I don't understand why it sounds so bad. Now, if you get up to kind of normal speeds and it's just you and you have the volume turned up and you're jamming to Demi Lovato, it doesn't sound that bad. So as you get the volume up, it does sound okay. It scales up better than crappy speakers that don't scale up well. But kind of at the speed and at the volume level that you're normally using, like 75% of the time, the stereo sucks, okay? So not a big deal. But what you can see here is, let me switch. These are some popular stations, I guess, in this area. I know 99.5 is US 99 country, but there is no metadata. And I kind of went through the menu to see, oh, maybe it's turned off or something. Why is there no RDS, like digital signal? My 5-year-old Fiat 500 has that, and I am kind of stunned that it doesn't have that. It doesn't give you the radio call sign. It certainly doesn't give you artist and song name, which is silly, because a lot of times you're like, oh, what is this song? It's new or whatever. You look down and there's nothing on the screen. So it doesn't seem to have that. That is a really strange miss, because I feel like everything has that, right? I mean, is that crazy or am I crazy? So the other thing here is you have this display button, which actually turns off the screen. So it's kind of a blackout button. You can turn it off and on. So I don't know, maybe you're out somewhere, you're driving and road tripping, and you just don't want that screen on. I do like having this display button and kind of kill the display. I'm actually a big fan of that. I wish more had it, because there's screens on everything now. But it's you know, it's standard here. So if you're a stalker and you're parked outside your girl's house or something, yeah, you don't have to have your face lit up as you're looking through binoculars. You can turn this bad boy off. Now, it's not quite the blackout button that the old Saabs had, where you'd hit that blackout button and it would black out everything. It's only this LCD screen, as you can see. Everything else is on. But, you know, it's a start, because, you know, these screens are on, and no matter how dim they still are putting out light. All right, now let me go down to the turn signals. Again, this is something that I like, and it's stupid, but I don't understand why car companies don't put some effort into it. I love the turn signal sound in this car. Kind of sounds like a tapping on a hollow bamboo rod or something. It's just it's not harsh like, you know, in almost every other car. And in fact, what it reminds me of is I used to have like a 2000 Jaguar, and the Jaguar turn signals are very similar too. So just, it's soft, but like, but refined, as opposed to kind of being just a standard turn signal. All right, I don't mean to make a big deal out of it, but I like this one. Down here, you do have a pretty big console or a storage bin down here in front of the shifter, somewhat blocked a little bit, but it's big and it's deep, so you can put your cell phone in here. What I really like about it is you have two 12-volt power outlets or accessory outlets, and then you have the USB port and the auxiliary 3.5mm jack down here, and they're both facing you and they're both lit up. And so what I really like is that when it's night, it's easy to see them and they're easy to get to, as opposed to burying them in a glove box or burying them down in the bottom of the center console where you can't even see them often because they're on the side or something, so you have to kind of fiddle and feel to find them. This is nice because they're very user friendly, so I could I could have my lightning cable in this USB jack. I could plug in my iPhone when I get it, throw it in there, close it up, and ready to rock. And even at night, like I said, it lights up this bottom very, very well. Let's look at where we left off. Obviously, we've got this center console, and I've mentioned that I like these plugs here. And the cool thing about them is that they're nicely lit up. USB and the aux jack are easy to see, directly pointed at me. Even here from the driver's perspective, I can see them. So the other thing that I actually do like is that you can actually see, it might be a little hard, but you can see my hand here is lit up with an ambient blue light that is shining down from top mounted control panel here, where I've got also map lights. But you always have this always on light blue, and it kind of just slightly bathes everything in blue light, so you can see where your hand is reaching. And obviously on camera it's going to be a little hard. You can see my ghostly hand there. Now it's really cool because obviously you know, you can see these in a lot of other cars, but at a car at this price point and kind of in a lot of passenger cars, they don't have that. So I do like it. Now my criticism on it is I wish that it were hooded a little bit. So if I put my finger around it, you can't see it, but you can still see that the light is on. My issue with it is that because there's no hood blocking the LED element directly, it's a little distracting because it's actually pretty bright. I'm sitting in the driver's seat where I would be driving, and you can see here that the element is easy to see. They could have put a little hood around it so I wouldn't actually see that, and yet I'd still get all the benefits of the things illuminated below it. All right. The other thing that I want to say here is that I hate this clock, because first of all, that is like the oldest school digital clock face I've ever seen. And it has a couple little buttons next to it. That's how you control it and set it. It's not tied into the head unit. I don't understand why the time isn't right there. There's a couple reasons. One, it looks like a seriously old school clock. My parents, like 1990 Honda Accord had a similar clock. It wasn't illuminated like that. But I just hate, it kind of takes this relatively high-tech cabin and makes it look like it's a bunch of pieces thrown together. The other thing is, it's like a sky blue. Might be a little hard to tell here, but one of the things that I don't like in general is that the whole color scheme is a little disjointed. There's obviously two main colors, white and blue, but on the white, as you can see here, the LED or the LCD between the two gauges here, may be hard to tell on camera, but they're just, this is a slightly dimmer white than the instrument clusters here. This LCD panel is a slightly dimmer white. It's registering in my mind that they're not exactly the same. I like how the font on that LCD panel and the font here on this LCD panel are consistent, and with the buttons are consistent, but this clock sticks out like a sore thumb. And then the blue that they have here is more like a baby blue or a sky blue, as opposed to kind of this more kind of purplish blue everywhere else. So the blue doesn't match. So there's a lot of subtlety about it that just drives me bonkers. And then the worst thing about the clock is the placement. So it's down here, just slightly halfway up the center console. But if you put your hand here, and I'm looking out forward, I cannot see the clock. My arm obscures the clock, and it would be awkward to be in any position almost that doesn't obscure the clock. So if you have your hands at 10 and 2, you cannot see the clock, which is probably why all the automakers put the clock up here. And it would be fine to have the time right there, like I said. But yeah, if your hand is here or even down here, there's a lot of positions where if your hand is anywhere from 3 o'clock on up, your hand or your arm obscures the clock almost completely. The other thing that I hate is how big this hazard button is and how bright it is. I mean, if you look at that, it is kind of the biggest thing that stands out. I wish it were a little more subtle, or maybe placed out on the center console somewhere, but right there it's just kind of this big red light shining at you. Move over just a few more inches and you got this stupid airbag passenger seat light that is saying that it's off, because I've got no one in the passenger seat. But it is huge, and secondly, it's a totally different color. And I get that these airbag off indicators tend to be in this gold or amber or yellow. But again, it's just striking because it's a different color. And then secondly, it is huge. I mean, first of all, it says off, but then why do you need to bracket it in between two lines? It's like the THX logo or something. I don't know why it says off and then they put lines highlighting it. First of all, it's way too big. I wish that it were smaller, dimmer, maybe just an airbag icon with a line through it or something, but that is super annoying because it's freaking huge. And now let me jump out here because I want to show you something else while it's dark out here that I don't like. It is these LED lines or kind of running lights down on the bottom portion of the bumper. And what I hate about them is that those LEDs don't blend together very well. They are kind of 6 or 7 LED bulbs that look very separated versus LED highlights around headlamps that like especially Dodge does a nice job of blending them together so you can't see the individual LED bulbs. It looks kind of like a neon bar. This looks like, everyone's doing LEDs, let's throw a few on there and create this stripe, but they are clearly different LED elements and it's freaking ugly. Particularly when combined with these headlights, which just happen to be projector lamp with halogen bulbs, I think, because you have this really yellow light on the headlight and this really white bluish light on these LED elements, and they contrast. Again, it's kind of like the contrasting colors in the cabin that annoy me. This looks like, oh, really high tech down here, really low tech up here. If you're gonna have high intensity discharge headlamps, xenons, laser lights, LED lights, or something like that, so that they're consistent, I can buy that. But the way this looks like is it just looks like Hyundai was looking at modern German cars and saying, oh, they're using LED running lights and accenting body lines, so we'll do that too. Check. But they just didn't execute it very well at all. Right out now, I can actually show you these lights here a little bit without getting so much glare, but you can see here that you've got that line of LEDs and the light up there, and they're just not even the same color. And to me, even though this is factory designed and installed, it looks like an add-on. It looks like a third-party accessory that you can buy at Pep Boys, like an LED light bar, and you can bolt it onto your bumper or something like that. It just, unless you're going to have like a curved line, you're going to kind of even out the LED light or something like that and kind of wrap around or accent the headlight or accent body lines or something like that, just to stick on lower running lights, to me, like this just looks like a total afterthought. So not a big fan of that. Now, one of the things that I do like about this car is that the engine is pretty peppy. I'm driving a little bit more lead-footed than I normally would, but it seems to really actually pick up pretty nicely, actually much more than I thought this 4-cylinder engine would do. What I am not happy with, and kind of surprised to the downside, is what you can see right there, is that I'm averaging 20 miles to the gallon. Let's just call 19.8 or 19.9, which is what I've been seeing, 20 miles to the gallon, which is quite a bit lower than I really expected, which I think it advertises something like 21 or 22 city and up to 31 highway. Now, granted, I don't live in the city, but I'm not really doing highway driving. It's really commuting to work and back, which can be stop and go. But even still, I'm getting on the low end of the city mileage, or below the city mileage, in kind of typical suburban driving. And that is mixed with a little bit of weekend road trips, etc., etc. So not really happy with the mileage figure there. I can't think of a car that I have been really happy with, but my Fiat 500, my long-term average has been right about where the EPA numbers suggested. The other thing that I will tell you that I'm not really happy about, and it's going to be hard to demonstrate here, is the brakes work very well, but they're not very linear or consistent, and it does vary quite a bit with temperature. But one of the things that I'm not really thrilled with is that as you get on the brake, kind of that first 20% of the brake travel is very, very spongy, and then it really kind of grabs from like 20% on, and then coming to a complete stop, you really do have to feather off the brake more so than you do in other cars to kind of bring the car to a gentle stop without kind of the abrupt jerkiness right at the tail end. But overall, I like this 2015 Hyundai Sonata. It's actually come a long way, Hyundai has, in recent years. The style, the shape, the proportions are all pretty nice. The car runs and drives fine. And I think for, you know, $22,000, you actually get a good value for your purchase. And, you know, in fact, when I look at, you know, Chevy Cruze starting at 22, 23, you know, I feel like this car is bigger. It looks a little more grown up. And, you know, you can easily move up the price point on a Cruze or into a Buick Regal or something like that, and the price starts really moving up. And I don't know that those look better or give you a better experience in this car. So 2015 Hyundai Sonata, Peter von Panda, out.